Welcome to the All Access Entertainment Podcast. I am your host, Joseph Bruen, here with Volume 3 of Vince Russo Conversation. Vince, welcome back to the show.
How you doing, man? Ready to go? See what you got in store for me this time.
Very good. Let's talk a little bit more in depth about WWF. We're going to dabble in some WCW as well. Let's kick it off first with kind of talking about when World Wrestling Federation went public. So when they officially went public, you left the WWF October 5th of 1999. They went public on October 19th of 1999. So you just missed it there. The McMahons promised their riches, basically, to be shared with the staff, essentially. And ultimately, they handed out incentive stock offers, which were pretty low. Did you kind of get wind of that before leaving, was my first part of the question. And the second part of that question was, what ultimately led to you leaving the company?
Yeah, no, I did not get wind of that. I had no intention whatsoever of leaving the company. It wasn't even a thought in my mind until I had a conversation with Vince after he added SmackDown. And at this point, I'm working 24/7. And, I had 3 kids at the time, and my wife was really having a hard time. So I wanted to be able to move my family to my wife's hometown so my wife would have some help, quite frankly. And I broached Vince about that. And, Vince said to me the infamous line, I don't see what the problem is, Vince. You make enough money now to hire a nanny to watch your kids. Bro, I swear to you, as soon as those words came out of his mouth, it was game over. It was game over. Because what was happening, honestly, was I was putting my job before my family. And when he said that to me, man, that was such a wake-up call to me. And it was over. I mean, there was nothing after that was going to keep me at that company. And that's when I got a hold of a friend of mine, who was very friendly with J.J. Dillon. And I think I went to meet with WCW that weekend.
Wow. So your initial meeting with WCW, when you officially arrive, what was that like? What was that experience meeting with the other side, after the big Monday Night War? It's got to be a strange feeling.
Yeah, it was really, really strange. But, one thing I tried to enlighten them on was, bro, everybody wants a turnaround immediately. It doesn't happen that way. I mean, you can wish it can happen that way, and it doesn't happen that way in anything. I mean, look at Tony's Jaguars this year, bro. I think they were 4-13 last year. Right. They're 13-4 this year. It takes time. So, what I really tried to do was go in there with a plan and tell them, yes, we are going to turn this thing around. This is how long it took the WWE to turn around. This is how long it's going to take. And this is the plan. That's what I really wanted to try to go in there with a plan. And, it's funny, bro, because, okay, Vince, no problem. We understand. We get it. They signed me to a contract, and literally they thought they were going to go from whatever they were, a 2.5 to a 3.5 in a week. It does not happen that way. I mean, the only way you increase ratings is it's slow and it's steady, and you've got to have a great show every single week. I had graphs showing them how long it took the WWE to get back in the game against, WCW. I literally had graphs of how we went from a 2.5 to a 2.8 to a 3. It was very, very, very gradual. But, 2 weeks in, they're looking for this miraculous turnaround. And even though, the first thing you got to do is stop the bleeding. That's the first thing you got to do. Once you stop the bleeding, then you'll have the gradual increase. And we were getting that because our plan was, man, the first 3 months, we've got to tear down the foundation and start building our own. That alone is a 3-month process. That alone is 3 months. And that's exactly what Ed Ferrara and myself were doing. And during those 3 months, and the ratings are on record, anybody can go look at them. During those 3 months, we stopped the bleeding and the ratings were going in the right direction. But it was, they wanted results immediately. I knew that wasn't going to happen. Then the politics started kicking in. And I knew that was happening too, man, because every time we were at TV, every time I turned around, Kevin Sullivan and J.J. Dillon were having sidebars. Every single time. I knew what was happening. I'd been around the business long enough. And, that's what led to me, going to WCW and leaving WCW.
Yeah. And back on the WWF side of things, episode 1, our first conversation, we spoke about the new generation and how there were some superstars that maybe just didn't hit, Mantar and some of the guys like that. When it comes to Mantar specifically, Mantar creatively, he kept coming back. So I feel like the WWF must have been invested in him in some form or fashion. And I was always curious why he would continuously be brought back as, Goldust's bodyguard in 1996. And then he was brought back as a masked man known as Tank in the Truth Commission. Do you remember that time period and why Mantar was continuously brought back?
Bro, I swear to God, if you would have told me Mantar was brought back a couple of times, I wouldn't have even known. I had no idea. I've learned a lot of things from you over these couple of interviews. There's another one. I did not even know that was a thing.
Yeah. Just one of those things.
Yes, right. Very interesting. Yes.
Always curious about that. 1997, King of the Ring, Providence, Rhode Island at the Providence Civic Center. Also curious about the creative process, the direction that you were originally going in for that show, because I remember the advertisements were Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart for the championship. And then I don't know if it was an injury or something happened with Bret where he ended up being there, but he kind of cut in a in-ring promo with the Hart Foundation. It ended up being the tag team champions against each other instead, Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold Steve Austin. But do you remember the original plans for the 1997 King of the Ring? Obviously, Triple H won that.
Man, bro, I swear I don't. It's funny. I remember, it's almost like God told me the things I had to remember. Like, I will remember big things. I will remember big things. I will remember things that were important. And I don't know if it's because at the time I knew they were important. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I swear to you, man, when I think about the day to day, the week to week, man, there is just so much stuff I don't remember. And bro, a lot of that has to do with writing a show every week. You're just going from one to the next, to the next, to the next. And the minute one airs, it's a memory and you're just on to the next show. So, situations like that, man, I just honestly, I don't remember.
Another thing that would happen in the Attitude Era, the 1998 NWA group would form. And you obviously had James E. Cornette, you had Barry Windham, you had Jeff Jarrett, you had the new Midnight Express. Do you remember the, creative plan behind that and why it didn't really last too long?
Yeah, that I remember. And I remember because that was a time when the writing team was me, Vince, and Cornette. And, Vince and I knew there needed to be a change. we didn't know exactly what that change was, but we knew we had to bring the product up to speed. And I remember one of the first things I told Vince was, Vince, you got to take the wrestling playbook and throw it out the window. In the past, where wrestling went left, we got to go right. And we got to keep doing that. And we got to keep doing that. And the reason why I said that was because I felt at the time the wrestling was so predictable. The only way you're going to get people to tune in and stay tuned in if you went completely the other way. And now they don't know what to expect. That's what makes must-see TV. So this was the road me and Vince were going down, and Cornette's pitching Memphis 1970. He was not on the same page as us. And I remember knowing, bro, this is never going to work. And the only way it's not going to work is to do it and show Jim it's not going to work. And that's basically why we did it. We did it, with guys that we knew he liked, with the NWA banner. I think we brought in the NWA promoter. What was his name again? I mean, we went all the way with it.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't going to work. I mean, it was like that time had passed. But that's the thing about Jim Cornette. And I think that's why he hates me. That's why we don't care for each other. Jim Cornette, like, even in a case like that where we did it and it didn't work because it was so far behind the times, he'll never say he's wrong. He'll just never, ever say he's wrong. We're in 2006, and Cornette would still think 1970s Memphis wrestling would go over. He would still believe that today. And it's like, no, bro, it just won't. I know in 2026, the Attitude Era wouldn't be over in 2026 because everything's changing. So you got to keep evolving. The key thing is you got to mirror society. Like, what's going on in the world? That's what your show is going to be like. So it was really like, okay, bro, we're going to do this, and you're going to see it's not going to work, and then maybe you'll get on board with us.
Yeah. And growing up, one of my favorites was always Brian Adams, the late Brian Adams, Crush. I always thought he was a great superstar, especially as a young child, when he was a babyface Crush. I mean, he got some massive ovations, especially on the international tours. Eventually, 1994, he would turn into the evil Crush character with Mr. Fuji. And then he got in some, trouble, obviously, left the company. But he would be brought back multiple times, obviously a member of the DOA, the Disciples of Apocalypse. He'd be a member of the Nation of Domination. He was managed by Clarence Mason in 1996 as, the jailbird Crush with the dreads. So he's had so many different looks over the years. What was it like to work with Brian creatively throughout all of those gimmicks?
Yeah, bro. First of all, like, the dude was the nicest guy in the world. That's why they kept having him back. I mean, there's obviously the way he looked. He looked like a freak. He looked like a blue chip athlete. He was always in shape, but he was always the nicest guy in the world and the nicest guy to work with. He did lack a little bit of personality, cutting the promo type of thing. And I think that had a lot to do with why he was in so many roles. I will say this, man. Once I went to WCW and it was Chronic, that was it for me. Like, that was, they're over. He's over. And it was the look. It was the two of those guys put together. But yeah, when you're a likable guy, they're always going to bring you back. And I think that's the category he fell in.
And we spoke on the other episode 2, about Jim Neidhart being who and how that possibly could have been a punishment or something. Let's talk about Earthquake. Obviously, a very well-known superstar within the wrestling industry. He would come back to the oddities as Golga, had the mask on. And I was always curious, being such a prominent superstar, and he was able to wrestle still, why was he not brought back as Earthquake?
Well, I'm going to tell you two things. One thing I know, and one thing I'm going to speculate. Okay? I believe at the time, Tenta was in a situation personally where he really needed money. So I'm assuming he came back to Vince in a position of need. Vince McMahon is going to look at that as weakness. He's not going to look at that as strength. So the fact that you're coming back and you need money and you're asking for a job, Vince is going to look at that as weakness. He just is. Now, of course, you're probably going to give a guy like John Tenta a job because he's a great guy, another great guy, another sweetheart of a guy, no question about it. But when I don't want to say groveling, but when you're showing weakness that like I need the money, Vince is just not going to hold you in high regard. Marry that to Vince thought it was a absolutely hysterical gimmick to have a wrestler who was hunchback and couldn't be pinned. That was Vince's sense of humor, 1,000%. So I think when you put those two things together, that kind of explains the Galga persona.
Let's talk about Gorilla Monsoon a little bit. You know, obviously he was the cornerstone of the World Wrestling Federation for a long time. We spoke about him briefly on the other episodes. Now, he would obviously become ill, but he would come back to the World Wrestling Federation, not on television, but you'd hear him on commentary. So he'd probably be doing it from the studio for Shotgun Saturday Night. And it was so odd as a fan to hear the gorilla voice on a modern TV show, you know, because you hadn't heard him in years. So it was kind of cool to hear him again. And then, of course, we'd all see him for his final appearance, which would be WrestleMania 15 in Philadelphia when he was introduced for the Brawl for All judge. When he got that massive standing ovation in his hometown there of Philly, do you have any recollection of that moment specifically or being there for that big ovation? Because from other employees, it seems to obviously have been a very emotional moment.
God, I swear, man, again, I am so sorry. I don't remember it. But I'll tell you one thing I do remember vividly, because it happened twice in the WWE. It really happened twice, and you saw it, okay? When Gorilla's son Joey died in that automobile accident, he just became a different man. Like, it was almost like, and listen, man, I got kids. I can't imagine losing one of my kids, but it was almost like the heart, the joy, the happiness, the entertainer. It's almost like that was all pulled out of him. I mean, really, and I totally get that. And I'll also tell you this: when Chief Jay Strongbow's grandson got drowned in a pool, it was the same effect. So I think for both of these guys with those personal losses, you know, it's just like, man, when something that personal and something that devastating happens in your life, that is the complete unexpected. You know, here you got a grandchild, and, you know, for Gorilla, you have a son. That is so unexpected. I think it literally just sucks the life out of you. And it's almost like nothing matters anymore. Like nothing's important anymore. It's the reality of life. And I really think both Gorilla and Chief, you know, both experience that is like just so tragic and so heartbreaking. But man, you know, again, that's when, look at the icons these guys were. You know, these guys were icons, wrestling icons, larger than life. And, you know, think about it, always on the road, always away from their families. And then when something like this comes out of nowhere,
yeah,
and it's family, and you weren't prepared for it, you did not know how to deal with it. And I think that's what really, really happened to Gorilla after he lost Joey.
And I remember as a fan seeing Gorilla in the way that he was, you know, and ill and everything. it had been about a year and a half since the fans had seen him on television.
Yeah.
And to see him in that state was obviously very sad. And we kind of knew that maybe that would be his last appearance. But it was so nice, on the other hand, to see Gorilla get his flowers
Yeah,
and such a tremendous ovation like that. That was
that is awesome. That is awesome. Yes.
Yeah. So let's talk about Bart Gunn. We talked about the Brawl for All. Obviously, Butterbean wiped them off the mat. You know, when that happened, why was it that Bart Gunn just kind of vanished from WWF?
Well, again, and I take responsibility for this, Joe. I take responsibility because I told you yesterday, part of my job is to help these guys get over. And here's the problem. As devastating as he was in the Brawl for All, it was still the same Bart Gunn. And Bart Gunn really lacked the entertainer part. He just really lacked that, man. He didn't have a personality. He didn't have a good promo. And that's going to come back to bite you in the ass sooner or later. It just is, because when you're a writer and like you got an Austin or you got a Rock or you got a Mick, or I can go on and on, a Shawn Michaels, I can't put this guy in the ring with them because he's going to get eaten alive. It's going to come down to promo. It's going to come down to, having a microphone in your hand and being across from the Rock. That's what it's going to come down to. And the reality of it is you're going to get eaten up. And that's why, because like I said, this guy was a blue chip athlete, the real deal. He looked like $1 million. But in wrestling, man, if you don't have that other side of it, you're only going to go so far. So it was, like I said, the loss to Butterbean had nothing to do with it. What had to do with it was, as impressive as he was, we were back to the same personality and the same issues we dealt with before the Brawl for All.
Right. Any memories of Richard Posner, props and magic department?
Oh my God, I got a whole chapter in my book. This guy was, I literally have a chapter in my book on Richie Posner. And this is like, everybody always says, oh yeah, Vince was the most successful at WWE because Vince McMahon was the filter, and that's why he was a failure at WCW and TNA. Bullshit. When I worked at WWE, two things. Number one, money was never an issue. So when I'm writing in a script that Triple H, is driving a whatever army vehicle that was to the building, when I'm writing that in the script, number one, I know it's going to happen, and number two, the cost rocket launcher. The cost means nothing. It doesn't matter. We want to fill up a Corvette with cement, whatever that Corvette costs. As a writer, you can write whatever you want, and it's going to happen. Money isn't an issue. Same with Richie Posner. You could write anything in a script, Buried Alive, Inferno match, whatever you wrote, whatever prop you needed, you knew it was going to look like $1 million because Richie was a magician by trade. Yeah. And I wrote a whole chapter. Here's my favorite story, Joe. See, I remember stupid things like this. I remember it was the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Yeah. And if you remember that, Vince took a hellacious bump off the cage.
Right on the edge of the table.
Now, bro, when I tell you after that, Vince's entire ass was the blackest of blues. Like you, Linda forced Vince to go to the doctor because Vince wouldn't sell it. And Linda said no. And she actually showed us the pictures of Vince's ass. That's how I know. Right. But I'll never forget. So Vince takes that hellacious bump. So it's after the show and we're all around the cage. And it's me, Richie, and Vince. And Vince is trying to cut a promo on Richie, telling him that he set the table up in the wrong space, this, that, and the other thing. And I'm standing next to Richie, and Richie is saying, nope, set it up exactly where it was supposed to be set up exactly. You missed it. And bro, I'm seeing Vince's face get redder and redder. And I'm trying to give Richie the Iggy, like, bro, shut the fuck up. Like, he had no idea. What he was concerned about was, this was my stunt. I set it up 100% properly. You took the bump in the wrong place. But to hear him tell, because Vince was not going to admit that he landed the wrong way. And I'll never forget that. I'm trying to give Richie the Iggy in front of Vince, like, bro, just take the heat for this. But that's how Richie was, because he took such pride in, like, and bro, I swear to God, to this day, I don't know how Buried Alive worked. I don't know how somebody got buried and died. I have no idea. A lot of those stunts that Richie did, like, Taker's in the coffin. Next thing we know, somebody else is in the. I have no idea how he did that stuff. But like I said, man, as a writer, that's a dream, because you can write anything and it's going to look great.
And you saying that actually just reminded me of another segment they did on Monday Night Raw where Diesel saw himself in the casket.
Yeah.
Do you remember what that was in the casket exactly?
I don't, but that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. I know whatever I write on paper is going to happen. Whereas when I'm working with these other companies, I've got these same ideas in my head, but I know there's no way. Like, they're just not capable of doing this, so I just wouldn't write it.
Yeah. Let's talk about wrestling legend Terry Funk. Coming back for the Attitude Era, we'd see him participate in the 1997 Royal Rumble at the Alamo Dome. He would kind of stick around for a while. He teamed up with Too Cold Scorpio, oddly enough. They became a tag team for a little bit, kind of an ECW-esque tag team. And then, of course, with Cactus Jack. Eventually, he'd become Chainsaw Charlie. Kind of walk us through what it was like to work with Terry during that time period and how he came about with Chainsaw Charlie.
Yeah, Chainsaw Charlie. And when I tell you the story, you'll say, yeah, I believe that 1,000%. First of all, the guy's a freak of nature. I mean, I go back and I watch some of the Attitude stuff and I'm seeing these bumps, and then I'm checking on Wikipedia. Yeah, Terry was 55 at the time. That's not normal. That is not normal. Chris Jericho's 55 now, and I don't even think Chris Jericho would be taking those bumps. So this is, again, we were talking about Bart. Here you got a guy in ring, and then you got the character. You got the complete package. So, man, again, it's me, Vince, and Cornette. And Cornette is shoving Terry Funk down Vince's throat. And one thing about Cornette, man, the thing is, bro, when you're working with Vince, when you've pushed enough. Like, I can just go up to that line and I can't go anymore. Cornette never knew that line. So, like, he would be pushing Funk to death. And now what you're doing is you're pushing Vince to do something because he's getting annoyed. That's really what's happening. And you got to be aware of that. At the same time, like I said, me and Vince are going towards the Attitude Era.
Yeah.
And this is when, in that meeting, Jim made the famous concept. Somebody wanted to be a surprise, right? So Jim tells me and Vince, we need to put them in a box and we need to sit the box ringside for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then Jim's line was, because everybody knows that anybody that comes out of a box is over. Okay. So take the combination of those two things.
Right.
He's pushing Terry Funk down Vince's throat, and now anybody out of a box is over. The birth of Chainsaw Charlie. And that was because, like, Cornette just did not know when to keep his mouth shut, when to push something. And that was Vince's 1000% total rip. And the bad thing about that is, like, Terry Funk got caught up in that. Terry Funk had nothing to do with it. Absolutely nothing to do with it. It was Cornette pushing him. Then it was everybody out of a box is over and Vince puts him. But I really felt bad for Terry because Terry kept trying to peek out of the mask and all that shit. I feel sorry for him because that had nothing to do with him. Nothing whatsoever. That was not a rib on him. That was no disrespect towards him. But it was Vince kind of telling Cornette, okay, you got your box and you got Terry Funk. You happy now? And that's how that happened.
Wow. Let's talk about the New Age Outlaws. The creative process early on, obviously they went on to become one of the most popular tag teams during the Attitude Era, all the crowd involvement and everything. But early on, you'd often see in dark matches Road Dogg and Bart Gunn teaming up. And I always wondered, was that the original plan for the New Age Outlaws? And even at the 1997 King of the Ring in Providence, that was the dark match. It was Road Dogg and Bart Gunn against the Headbangers. And they kept teaming up. And then all of a sudden, Billy Gunn, who at the time was kind of trying to find himself, he was rockabilly, he was a solo cowboy, he was managed by the Honky Tonk Man. And then all of a sudden, he's just paired up with Road Dogg. Will you remember that process?
Well, I do remember this, bro. I don't remember the Bart part of it at all. But I do remember Vince came to me with the idea of putting Billy and Road Dogg together. And bro, I got to tell you, I did not see it. I did not see it. I told Vince, I don't see this. I don't see this working. And that was Vince's baby and Vince's idea. And I got to tell you, because it was his baby and his idea, he was heavily involved in producing them. Vince really didn't produce a lot of talent outside of the top guy, but like this was his baby. So slowly but surely, and let's just be 1000% honest. 80% of it was the charisma of Brian James. I mean, without a shadow of a doubt, without a shadow of a doubt. But what happened was we wanted to put them with DX. Even Hunter and Sean did not want them in DX because they didn't think they were over. So that's why we ran the New Age Outlaws for a while, to the point that Hunter and Sean could not say no any longer because they were over and they had gotten themselves over. But at the beginning, they did not want those guys to be part of the group. And again, man, I give Vince 1000% credit for that because that was something that I did not see. He saw it and he was 1000% correct.
I was always a big fan of Dan the Beast Severn. And when he came to the WWF, I was already very familiar with him and his UFC background. So I was so excited for him to be there. And, even though it was just a gray shirt, with the water on it, it was a cool look, obviously a badass look for him. He had a great theme song, thanks to Jim Johnston. Why do you think it is that Dan Severn didn't really pan out?
I think that's easy, Joe. I swear to God, I think it's easy. I think he didn't pan out because Ken Shamrock was so freaking good. I say to this day, bro, I swear to God, I say this to this day. Ken Shamrock, and I'm talking about going back to when I was a 12-year-old kid. Ken Shamrock was the most believable guy I've ever seen in a wrestling ring. I believed everything Shamrock did. I believed every move. I believed every facial expression. I believed when he snapped. He was so good. So now, especially with the promos and just the fire and he was so good in his promos, the facial expressions, the emotion. And you had Dan Severn that was completely on the other side of the spectrum. But as you know, it's just so funny, bro, because it just keeps getting brought up over and over and over and over. Character. You know, the New Age Outlaws got over because of Brian James, and Bart didn't get over because of Bart, and Shamrock got over and Dan Severn didn't. And really, that's what it comes down to. I think if Shamrock wasn't there, it could have been a totally different story. Yeah. But the fact that he was the UFC MMA guy and had this personality and this fire, it just made Severn look as boring as shit. And at the end of the day, I think that was the issue.
Let's talk about the loose cannon Brian Pillman. Obviously, he had injuries. He had been in an accident. There's only so much you could do with Brian Pillman in certain scenarios. But I feel like his short run in the WWF was still a lot of fun. He was involved in, obviously, that incident at the house with Stone Cold, which was a huge moment. Of course, whenever he was on commentary, it was crazy. He fit in so well with the Hart Foundation. The storyline with Marlena and wearing the dress and Goldust, that whole thing was great. What was it like creatively working with Brian Pillman throughout that whole run?
Bro, I got to tell you two things that really stand out. It is so funny, bro, because that whole angle with Goldust, and then I remember Pillman was in bed with Marlena. I remember all that. Bro, while I'm writing all that, I didn't know that they used to date. I had no idea Brian Pillman and Terry Runnels were a thing. And here I am, I'm putting them in scenes in bed together, not having a clue till Terry smartened me up. But I'll never forget this, bro. This is what I'll never forget. We were driving from point A to point B, but I remember it was me, Terry was in the back, and Brian was in the driver's seat. Bro, I swear to God, every time I hit the smallest bump or made a turn, he would wince. That's how much, and he never sold it. You would never know. But when I was in him with that car and every movement of that car, you could see the pain in his face. And it was after the accident. And that's when I realized, bro, this guy is in more pain than we realize. And bro, when see, that's the problem, man. The boys are never going to sell. They're never going to sell. But now, consciously in my mind, when I'm seeing something like that and I'm writing, I'm like, bro, how much can I ask him to possibly do? He's not going to sell. He's not going to say he's hurt. I know damn well that he's hurt. Because, bro, I never forgot when I left the WWE, I had a phone conversation with Terry Taylor. And Terry Taylor told me that The Undertaker had a lot of heat with me because The Undertaker felt like I always made him work hurt. I didn't make him work hurt, bro. I didn't know. When you don't sell and you don't tell me you're hurt, I don't think you're hurt. The only reason I knew this with Pillman was because he was sitting right next to me. So if Taker's really hurt and he's not telling me, I don't know. So of course I'm going to book Taker like I'm booking a healthy Taker. And bro, that's always an issue because if somebody's hurt, you want to protect them, but the wrestler mentality, oh, I'll lose my spot. If I tell them I'm not hurt and they put, you know that whole mindset. But the reality of the situation is, man, I'd rather you let me know so I can protect you. And, like I said, man, then when Pillman passed, was I surprised? It was probably due to painkillers and everything else. Absolutely not. I mean, if the guy's in pain when I'm taking a left turn, what's it like getting out of bed? What's it like getting on a plane? What's it like getting in a shower? I can't imagine the pain the dude was in, man.
And beyond the pain, what was Brian like as a person during that time period? Was he easy to work with, nice guy, or was he?
Yeah, bro, very, 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 very laid back. The opposite of the intense character he was on TV. But my God, bro, what could have been in the Attitude Era with him, I can only dream about, because he was definitely way ahead of his time. Way, way, way ahead of his time. I remember freaking Austin. I remember Austin sending me a promo of when Pillman arrived for the first night at ECW. And Steve said, Vince, you've got to watch this promo. You got to watch this promo. So that is telling you right there, Pillman had a great influence on Austin. And that there was Pillman before there was Austin. And that's what I mean about a guy being way, way ahead of his time. He definitely was.
And obviously it didn't pan out due to what happened, but creatively, were we going to see something with Steve and Pillman? Because I feel like it was either SummerSlam or King of the Ring 96. Pillman's walking with the crutches. Stone Cold's passing him. They had the stare down, kind of acknowledge each other and walked on. But then we didn't really ever see the payoff or anything happen with that.
Yeah, you definitely would have. I don't know how you couldn't have. I really don't. God, that would have been absolutely incredible. Yeah, that definitely would have happened.
Yeah. What are your memories of the late Tim White?
Oh God, Tim was another great dude, man. Just a great dude. Great, smile on his face all the time. Loved his job. Loved the company. I know everybody used to go to Tim's bar. I was not a drinking guy, but again, man, just a great, great, great dude. Obviously, the role he played in the life of Andre, everybody knows, but a great, great, great dude, man.
And how important do you think that Jim Johnston's music was to the industry of pro wrestling?
Oh, bro, who took a shot at him the other day? Somebody took, I think it was Bruce.
It was Bruce.
And I'm like, why would you say that? Why in God's name? What is the point? What did Jim Johnston ever say to you? Bro, I say the same thing with Jim Johnston that I said about, Ross and Lawler. The Attitude Era is not the Attitude Era without Jim Johnston's music. Period. End of story. I have no problem saying that. I wrote the stuff. Without Johnson's theme songs, it would not have been the same, without a shadow of a doubt. Bro, I swear to God, I'll watch the WWE today. A guy will be on the roster or a girl for 3 years. Bro, they'll hit the music. I don't know who it is. Right. I don't know who it is till they come out. I swear to you, I don't know whose music it is. Yeah. When I saw that comment by Bruce, I'm like, why would you even say, why would you want to take anything away from this guy and this guy hands down should be in the WWE Hall of Fame. I mean, let's be honest. It's ridiculous that he's not. But again, you're talking about the Kevin Dunns, the Richard Curtises, the Tim Whites, the Jim Johnsons. All of these people played a tremendous role in the success of the WWE. All of them.
Another person who would kind of pop up out of nowhere during the Attitude Era was Jason Sensation. And I was always amazed at his talents. He was so good with the voices, and obviously, he appeared to different things. Faneuil Hall for the DX workout and a couple different things. What was it like? Any interactions with Jason over the years?
Bro, I still keep in touch. I just got a text from him 2 days ago. I still keep in touch to Jason to this day. He'll leave me messages as different characters. Jason had a really hard time because, and this happens to some people in the business. When he got in wrestling, this was like, in his mind, the pinnacle of his life. Like, this was the dream. This was what he wanted. He was on TV. People knew him, very successful. But when that was taken away from him, he started going in a downward spiral. And there are some people like that in wrestling, whereas the business and the job is everything to them. And when you take it away from them, man, it's you see it. And I really feel Jason's one of those guys that has kind of struggled with that his whole entire life. Yeah. But talented guy. And like I say, to this day, I still keep in touch with him.
Always been a big fan of Jeff Jarrett throughout the years, and Jeff has, I always wanted some insight from you as to why Jeff Jarrett would kind of bounce back and forth. So it felt like traction was going well with Jeff. 94 he was in WWF, and then 96 all of a sudden he's in WCW. 98 he's back in WWF, 99 he's back in WCW. Why was there the bouncing back and forth, you think, with Jeff Jarrett creatively?
I don't think creatively had anything to do with it. I think it was 100% money. No question about it. To this day, Jeff went wherever he got more money. I mean, it's really that simple. And again, the son of a promoter. Yeah. He gets it. He understands. Jeff bouncing back and forth had nothing to do with talent, had nothing to do with character, none of that stuff. Jeff was kind of playing that free agent role before anybody else ever did. Because I promise you, when he went from place to place to place to place, there was a nice increase in pay. And that's why he did it.
Yeah. Take us back to 1997, the first ever Hell in the Cell. Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker. It was In Your House, Bad Blood. Do you have any memories of whatever led up to that, or the match itself, or the whole storyline as a whole?
I do. I remember, and I get upset about this. I remember going to Vince's house, and Cornette was there, and they had come up with the concept of a bigger cage. And the reason why they came up with the concept of the bigger cage is Shawn and Undertaker did not want to just have to work within the ring. They wanted to go outside of the ring and have more space. They didn't want it to be limited by the ring. That's when they came up with the concept. Okay. So I remember sitting there, and then they were looking for a name for it. And I pitched the name to Vince, Hell in the Cell. And that's what they named it. It's really bothered me over the years because I don't think people understand. If you go back to the beginning, you will clearly see it was Hell in the Cell. Reason being, we knew this was going to be a tradition. The Cell means the cell. So now the cell is a part of the match.
Right.
That was the original concept. Somehow, some way, we segued into Hell in a Cell. That means it could be in any cell. That wasn't the idea. I take offense to that because there's a big difference to me. The Cell was supposed to be a character. Right. The cell in itself. And I don't know, maybe it just rolled off the tongue easily, but it turned into Hell in a Cell. And to me, well, a cell is not special. A cell could be any cell in any town. But anyway, that's where it originated from, that they did not want to be restricted to just the cage on the ring. They wanted that outside space. So that's how it originated.
So after the Montreal Screwjob, Jim Neidhart, British Bulldog, they would go on to WCW. Didn't have much of a run there. It just wasn't the same for them as it was in the WWF, of course. Owen Hart stayed in the WWF. Why was it, do you think, that Owen, didn't go with his family at that time?
God, man, I'll never, this is something that I'll never forget. The Montreal Screwjob takes place, okay? That following week, and I'm thinking it was towards the end of the week, I get a frantic phone call from Owen, okay? And bro, you got to understand, and we hit on this, if you knew Owen, you loved Owen. So there isn't anything in the world you're going to do for Owen. So Owen called me frantic, upset, on the verge of tears, saying, Vince, you need to talk to Brett, because Brett is telling me if I go back to the WWE, he will disown me as a brother. And now I know this is not Vince Russo conversation. This is a Vince McMahon conversation. I don't need to get involved in this. So that's the first thing I said to Owen. Owen, you got to call Vince. And he was like, Vince, I tried calling Vince. He's not calling me back. You got to talk to Brett for me. You got to talk to Brett. Bro, because it was Owen, I called Brett. Bro, you got to understand, this is 5 days after the Montreal Screwjob, right? So I'm talking to Brett now, and I'm pretty much the enemy. And I said to Brett, I said to him, I'll never forget one thing he said to me that I'll never forget was, Vince, you know what I felt like doing that next day after the Montreal? You know what I felt like doing the next day? I felt like going into that building with a gun and taking everybody out. That's how serious he was taking it. That's how upset he was. And I had to sit on the other end of the phone, and I had to tell him, Brett, you're not going to agree with this. You may never agree with this. You may hate me for saying this, but I'm going to be honest with you. This was never about Vince not trusting you. This was about Vince not trusting Eric Bischoff. The last thing Vince wanted Eric Bischoff to do was parade the title around on his show. I said, so you're never going to agree with me, but the decision Vince McMahon made was to protect his entire company. That's why he made that decision. And I'm like, Brett, I'm sorry. I agree with that. I agree with that decision. It was never about you. It was never about not trusting you. But Bischoff at that time, you couldn't put that past him doing that. And I remember having that conversation with man, one of the hardest, I swear to God, bro, the two hardest conversations I had in wrestling was that one with Brett. And then when I had to go face Brett when I went to WCW, when Owen had died in the interim. And I had to sit down with Brett. Far and away the two hardest conversations I ever had. But I think with Owen, man, I'll be honest, I think a part of it was money. And I think the other part of it was Owen's love for the company. I mean, that was kind of where he started. He had so many friends there. It wasn't his beef, you know, and I think Owen really, really wanted to stay with the company. But man, that was a real tough time for everybody, man.
So when you left the World Wrestling Federation in 1999, obviously the following year, you know, you're there in WCW. We would lose the Radicals to the WWF, Perry Saturn, Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit. You know, creatively, how were you feeling being on the other side and losing all of that talent to WWF?
I was home, and that's why they left. So that, you know, like, because when I left, I think I went into the office on a Friday, and we had a pay-per-view that Sunday, and they were on Raw that Monday. So the whole reason they left was because Sullivan was back in charge. They knew I was home, and that was the whole reason why they left.
And what was your initial reaction when you saw that taking place?
You know, I mean, there was a part of me that I don't want to say I was happy, but it felt nice to me that they were making that stand. It really did. But at the same time, they were kayfabing Shane Douglas. And, you know, I've always admired Shane. Shane, bro, I could probably name 5 straight shooters that I ever worked with in a business that I know would never lie. Shane's at the top of that list. Shane's just like, he's too honest for his own good. So I've always been a Shane guy. And while this shit was going on, Shane was calling me, Vince, do you know anything about this? These guys aren't returning my calls. I'm hearing that they may be in Stanford. So it was kind of mixed because it was nice that they were taking a stand, but I was also feeling bad for Shane because it looked like they were kayfabing him about that. And obviously it was based on the prior relationship Shane had with the WWE. So it was a little bittersweet, you know?
And why do you think it was that, the Dean Douglas character was presented to Shane a certain way, and then it was actually completely different when he actually portrayed it?
Yeah, I don't know, man. That was kind of before my time. Like, I produced some of the Dean Douglas stuff. I mean, I was producing some stuff at that time. But, I know there was the He with the Click and all that stuff. But honestly, man, that was before I was really, really involved. So I'm not sure.
Any memories of the talent exchange between WWF and ECW? 1997, Draws would appear on ECW, Jerry the King Lawler. Then a lot of the guys would appear on Monday.
Yeah, this is why I don't like Paul Heyman, and I will never like Paul Heyman because of this. Vince smartened me up about the working relationship with Paul Heyman and the WWE. So here I am. You've got this guy on television who's a rebel, FWWE. I got the baseball cap, and meanwhile, you're in business with Vince. So that didn't sit too well with me, number one. So here's what the arrangement was supposed to be. Vince, if we've got guys that maybe need more seasoning, maybe need more television time, maybe aren't getting over, we send them to ECW. When you see somebody on their show that you want, I will tell Paul and we'll bring them over here. Okay? So I watched a little ECW, not a lot. People think I was inspired by ECW. If I saw 4 ECW shows, it was a lot. I was inspired by the NWO. No doubt about that. Not ECW. Yeah. But anyway, when I watched ECW, I fell in love with the Dudleys. So I said, Vince never had no idea who was on their roster. Vince says this tag team, the Dudleys, blah, 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 blah. I like to bring them over. So Vince calls Paul. Okay, we want to bring in the Dudleys. Paul gets back to Vince and tells Vince, unfortunately, the Dudleys aren't interested in coming to the WWE. And I looked at Vince and I'm like, are you fucking kidding me, Vince? You're going to tell me those guys rather work a bingo hall than Madison Square Garden? That is absolute bullshit. So what's happening here is he's taking our talent, but now when we want somebody, they don't want to come. I knew he was full of shit. Sure enough, man, there used to be this wrestling personality based in New York. I don't know if you know him or not. Guy's name was Black Jack Brown.
Yeah, absolutely.
Black Jack Brown, good friend of mine, Black Jack Brown. I get a call from Black Jack Brown. Vince, somebody wants to talk to you. And it was Bubba Ray Dudley. And him and Devon 1,000% wanted to come to the WWE. They contacted me behind Paulie's back, and then I set up a meeting with them and Vince. And that has always pissed me off because, number one, you make a deal with Vince and you're not going to live up. Well, number one, you're playing this whole rebel thing on television and you're full of shit because Vince is paying you. That's number one. No, number two, now you make a deal with Vince of we'll trade talent. So now we're giving you talent and you're not giving us yours. And then number three, bro, you're actually going to cock block these guys from making 5 times the amount of money that you pay them? You're really good. I thought that was horrible. Listen, man, I put myself in his shoes. Would I want to lose the Dudleys? Absolutely not. Would I prevent them from multiplying their paycheck 4 or 5 times? Absolutely not. And that really, really pissed me off about that guy, that you're going to keep these guys from making 5 times more that they could at the WWE for your own selfish reasons of keeping them there. And I'll be honest with you, man, from that day on, I have not liked that dude.
Yeah. Well, as you can tell by some of my questions, I pay close attention to some of the small details in pro wrestling. And one of them is WCW ring announcer David Penzer. I was always a fan. I thought he did a great job. And I thought maybe you would know this, but why was it that David Penzer was always on or often on the house mic? You know, you'd be watching it on television, and clearly he was on the house mic where the arena could hear him, and it didn't come through on television. And I always wondered, why is David Penzer on the house mic where, you know, WWF, Howard Finkel, nice and clear. It was never the case in WCW, and I always wondered about that.
I have no idea. Again, you just schooled me and educated me. I have no idea. But man, there were a lot of things. Again, we go back to Richie. We go back to money. There were just a lot of things at WCW that were just done on like a B or C level. I remember in particular, it might have been Scott Hall and Jeff, but there was a match where there were 4 boxes in each corner, you know, and there's a weapon in each box. And I'll never forget, I'm watching this match and the freaking boxes are falling over during the match. I remember when we did the new blood angle, they're dropping the blood and not hitting the person. Yeah. Like it was, see, those were the things. Now I'm going to get the heat for all of that. All of that is my fault. But those are the things at the WWE, you just knew that that's not going to happen. It's just not. And that was really the difference in writing for the WWE and different companies, man.
Any memories of Todd Pettengill?
I didn't like Todd, bro. And I'll tell you why. I always felt, listen, at that time, WPLJ was a big deal in New York. Everybody listened. I can remember 95.5 WPLJ. Everybody listened to it. And I always kind of felt like he looked down his nose at wrestling. And he always felt like wrestling was beneath him. And like I said, bro, PLJ was the hottest thing going at the time. That's why they brought him in. And it may have been a time where we needed him more than he needed us. But I always, every time I worked with him, I just always felt like he felt we were beneath him. And I would just be like to myself, bro, if we're beneath you, then why are you working here? Yeah, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it was really nothing personal. I never got into words with him or anything like that. That's just how he made me feel.
In the year 2000, there were 140 superstars on the roster for WCW.
2000?
The year 2000, yeah.
Okay.
140 superstars. You know, how do you tackle a roster like that creatively and try to make it important for everybody?
You don't. People got to go. I mean, people got to go. They got to go. When you have that many people, there is no way in the world to make everybody happy. People got to go. I always say, bro, you gotta, you know, with these wrestling shows, bro, you've got to pick like your, you know, these are the 15 people I'm going with. This is the team, bro, because what the number one key to getting over, the number one key is you got to be represented on every show. Now, that does not mean you got to be wrestling on every show. You could be on color. You could be doing a vignette on the back. You know, there are several ways to be a package of highlights, but you've got to be represented on every single show. That's the number one rule. Because what happens is if they keep shuffling you in and out, it's a constant start over. You're starting over every time. So now they're going to be on the show for 2 weeks and we're going to send them home for 2 weeks. And now we're going to bring them back. You're never getting over that way. You've got to be on every single show. And that's why, like I said, man, it is vital to pick that roster. These are the guys and the girls we are going with. This is the team. This is the starting five. These are the starting players that are going to be on every single show. Can we weave somebody in here, somebody in there? Absolutely we can. 140 people on the roster. I wouldn't even know where to start. And I bet you Tony Khan's close to that these days.
Right. He's got a deep roster as well. Well, in closing, Vince, a hypothetical question. You're given the book. How do you handle the AJ Styles retirement year?
Oh, wow. That's a great question, man. I would probably, as a surprise, bring back names from AJ's past for one more match. And I'll tell you why. Because in TNA, where he really got his start, it was really about like the X division. And I bet you with a lot of those guys, they still got one left in them. Like, I bet you could put AJ out there with Kazarian and they'd have a decent match. I bet you put AJ out there one match with Chris Daniels. Now, again, some of these guys work for AEW, but maybe some kind of a deal could be made. You put him in there with a Samoa Joe. You know, you put him in. Well, I don't think Kurt can wrestle anymore, but from the school AJ came from, I think there are still a lot of guys he could have great matches with. And man, that's where they dropped the ball with Cena. I mean, Joe, just so you know, and this is a fact. Kurt Angle was calling the WWE and pitching ideas and angles. He wanted to be a part of Cena's retirement, and they shot him down.
Wow.
They shot that. That's a fact. That ain't a rumor. Trust me, that's a fact. And I'm like, with what we got, you guys are turning down Kurt freaking Angle. You know what I mean? And that's another thing. If guys can't wrestle, bring him in and let him do it. Or let Kurt Angle mentor AJ Styles for a night. Whatever you want to do. AJ has such a rich history of a lot of guys that are still around that, man, you could shuffle guys in and out on a weekly basis, and I think it could be an incredible story.
And does AJ win or lose, you think, in that last match? And if you had to choose, who would that last match be against?
God, well, I mean, again, if everything, could be worked out, it probably would be Joe. I probably remember AJ and Joe the most.
Yeah.
See, if it's something like that and you're not trying to give somebody the rub, you put AJ over. And I would love to see somebody like that. I would love to see the last match is going to be his most wrestled opponent, yada, yada, yada. Not where 99.9% of the time we got to give a younger guy the rub on the way out. Because first of all, you never do anything with the rub. Bro, Austin Theory beat John Cena. What have we done with Austin Theory? Gunther beat John Cena. What have you done with Gunther since? Nothing. So I would love, like that one time, the Apollo Creed, Rocky Balboa.
Yeah.
We're going to go one more time. And then if you put AJ over, it's fine. It makes sense.
Right. Well, Vince, thank you so much for joining us for part 3. It's been a pleasure to have you for all these interviews. And I think we've enlightened the fans with a lot of great material. And who knows, we, may do another one down the road. We'd love to have you back sometime.
Yeah, it was awesome, bro, to talk about a lot of things I normally don't talk about. So I want to thank you for that, because I think you could, see my love of 70s wrestling and stuff like that, and bringing up some of the names that you brought up that don't even get mentioned, that were vital to the success of that company. So I think that was really cool. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. For Vince Russo, RussoBrand.com. Of course, check out JCW as well every Thursday. I'm Joseph Bruen, and this has been the All Access Entertainment Podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your comments. Love to hear from you, the fans. We'll see you next time.